Hello, Products That Count community. Welcome to a special episode of Product Talk. I am Hoda Mehr, CEO of Products That Count, and today I have a special guest. Imagine you are running a job marketplace, connecting 20 million students and alumni, 1,500 educational institutions, and 1 million employers. And then within a year or so, you turn all that into one of the hottest and fastest growing AI companies in your industry.
When Garrett, our CEO and co-founder, asked me, I think it was in December, hey, can I have 10 hours of your time? I want to explore a new idea. I did not have any idea what human data was. And that has ballooned into a 150 plus person company, over $100 million in revenue. And it was not what we anticipated from the start.
Today's guest is someone who's done that and who's been through that experience. I'm speaking with Gabe Schindler, head of design and founding product designer at Handshake AI, who helped grow the business from 0 users to this amazing company with more than $100 million in revenue from their AI business. Gabe has been at the forefront of several rapidly growing stories and startups, including Handshake AI, Oscar Health, Level, and Nudger. I invited Gabe to this special programming because of how the rules of building products and designing products in the AI era is changing. We are now building for trust, we're building for usability, and then we are redesigning all of the past rules that exist in product design and product development as a result of rapid growing in the AI space.
The AI industry and most large language models have reached the end of what they can learn from the free internet. You've probably encountered this yourself, talking to an AI, name any of them, and you ask it something and it just doesn't get that answer. That same problem is encountered for millions of people using AI, and that's because AI has not been trained on the expertise involved in physics, medicine, music composition, graphic design. You name it, AI is at the infancy of what it knows.
So if you are a product manager, if you are a product designer, if you are a founder building a product in this space, this episode is for you because it can give you some frameworks and mental models and design principles for designing in the AI era. We're going to talk about tough calls that you need to make.
At first, we thought it would be a really odd experience because you're the expert and you are teaching AI about physics or math or name any type of subject matter. And we thought that our fellows would A, find it really frustrating for an AI to be telling them what to do, or be telling them how to talk to another AI, but we actually found it was really supportive. People like learning in the moment, and the skill of training a model is incredibly different than the actual skill that they have out in the field.
Pivots that you may need to make, and maybe frameworks and mental models you need in hiring and deciding and collaborating with product managers, product designers, and engineers and rest of the team, all because the rules of product development is changing in the AI era. So without further ado, let's welcome Gabe to Product Talk. Gabe, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Hoda. Really happy to be here.
Well, Gabe, let's start the conversation from a basic conversation. What does even Handshake AI do? If you can give us a little bit of background, the reason I invited you is just the cool journey the organization and the company has been through, but walk us through that cool journey if you could.
Sure. Yeah. So Handshake is a career marketplace. We've been around for about 10 years. We have over 20 million students on our platform. We work with over 90% of colleges and universities in the US. And I believe now we have about 1 million employers on our platform. And it is a traditional career network, applying for your first job, second job, internship, and building your career from the ground up. Handshake AI has built upon that effort, and it works directly with the top frontier AI labs to help those labs develop and advance cutting-edge large language models. So Handshake AI leverages its millions of experts. We have hundreds of thousands of PhDs and master's students and other professionals, and we match them with AI labs to actually help develop the LLMs themselves.
Well, it's almost like Handshake, the company went through its second wave. You guys already were an amazing organization on its product, millions of users were using it, and then you went through the second wave with this AI product. So can you walk us through maybe what was that moment of pivot look like? And then I specifically want to talk about your design side of the story and how did this impact the design side of the story. But maybe walk us through that moment of pivot or what happened and how did you guys started this second wave, and then we'll have a conversation about this redesign of the product or designing for this new second wave.
Hi, this is Renee Nemi, Resident Chief Product Officer at Products Account. We're taking a quick break to chat with a friend of the show, Mighty Capital. GP of Mighty Capital, SC Mawadi, is here with me. SC, for listeners who don't know yet, what makes your approach different?
We're a product first venture firm, so we back enterprise founders where product is the growth engine. Our edge is what we call the CPO alpha effect, which is a data backed framework that helps us source, diligence, and help companies scale faster. That's how we backed category winners like Amplitude, Airbnb, Grok, and more.
Yeah, and the results speak for themselves. You celebrated your sixth IPO with Netscope recently, right?
We're so proud of the founders. And you're right, the goal is compounding product excellence. So over time, about 1 in 5 of our companies becomes an outlier.
Yeah, and you don't just write a check either.
Right. We plug teams into product, design partners, and our CPO fellows who roll up their sleeves on roadmap, pricing, and go to market so that teams hit milestones faster and raise on better terms.
So if I'm a founder building a B2B product, how do I engage?
Well, email me at sc@mighty.capital or message me on LinkedIn or X, and I'm happy to connect.
Awesome. Love it. Learn more at mighty.capital. Now back to the show.
Sure. Yeah. So the company Handshake AI, a division of the larger organization, is a startup within, a 10-year-old company. When Garrett, our CEO and co-founder, asked me, I think it was in December, hey, can I have 10 hours of your time? I want to explore a new idea. I did not have any idea what human data was. And that has ballooned into a 150 plus person company, over $100 million in revenue. And it was not what we anticipated from the start. We had no idea we'd be working with every AI lab. It was very simple. It was a flow for candidates and a flow for employers or recruiters to get matched. And that's all it was. We did not understand, where the thing was going necessarily, but we had an inclination that there was some really interesting opportunity having all these professionals and expertise in our network and the possibility of helping them use their brains to train models.
So actually, it kind of like you told me when your CEO asked, give me 10 hours of your week, and you had no ideas. But as you got introduced to this product, you probably had some assumptions about what is it going to be, as you guys figured it out. So walk us through what were the early assumptions you were making as those 10 hours, or I'm sure those 10 hours became 100 hours per week, and no, in a very short period of time. But walk us through some of the assumptions you were making around product design at the beginning, and then as you started to working with AI labs, different AI labs, you kind of like, oh, this assumption I had was totally wrong, and now I need to change it.
Yeah, we had to throw every assumption out the window. Like I said, I did not know what human data was. So maybe to back up a little bit, the AI industry and most large language models have kind of reached the end of what they can learn from the free internet. You've probably encountered this yourself, talking to an AI, name any of them, and you ask it something and it just doesn't get that answer. That same problem is encountered for millions of people using AI, and that's because AI has not been trained on the expertise involved in physics, medicine, music composition, graphic design. You name it, AI is at the infancy of what it knows. So we didn't really realize that actually AI is at just the beginnings, and we need people and their brains and their expertise to help shape and excel it. So the first thing that we built was actually an AI interviewer. It's what we knew as a company. We knew how to hire people, how to recruit, how to match individuals with their careers. And we built what was a AI interviewer. So a candidate would talk to an AI. We would be able to upload a resume, and the AI would have a very specific conversation about that person's experience. And from there, it kind of took off because that was the gate that we were able to first learn about these candidates and then learn how we could match them with AI labs. And from there, it was a lot of learning and very, very big assumptions. We had no idea how humans would talk to AI. It's incredibly new. It's very weird. It's not the most human, but at the same time, it's happening. And we thought that we should figure out how it fits into the larger recruiting ecosystem. And to be honest, people were fine with it. They kind of actually, we did a ton of user research, and we found that candidates found that it was a little bit easier to talk to an AI about themselves because the pressure was lowered. They didn't feel like a recruiter or an interviewer was necessarily trying to zone in on one thing. Instead, it was an incredibly contextual interview, and people were able to feel relaxed and talk about themselves.
I remember reading somewhere they said, I think I can find that, but it was a research done as a AI basically chatbot, playing a role of a doctor. And then what was the surprising fact that was learned is that the empathy, which you think it's the human domain, right? Human to human conversation comes with empathy and sympathy. But it turned out that when you would do conversation with AI versus you would do with a human, people actually score the conversation with AI more empathic and higher a score in empathy. Did you guys find some of those interesting counterintuitive discoveries as you kind of went through product design and started onboarding users? Are there examples of that, similar to that, sort of surprising learnings?
Yes, we did not. So learnings, definitely people kind of let their guard down and they were more open with talking to an AI about their experience. We were also just really excited about the opportunity for people to train models. And actually, there's a thing that we call quality checks, where an LLM is working with what we call a fellow who's training the models. And that quality check helps the fellow as they are trying to stump a model and then teach it. And at first, we thought it would be a really odd experience because you're the expert and you are teaching a AI about physics or math or name any type of subject matter. And we thought that our fellows would find it really frustrating for an AI to be telling them what to do, or be telling them how to talk to another AI. But we actually found it was really supportive. People like learning in the moment. And the skill of training a model is incredibly different than the actual skill that they have out in the field. So that was definitely one very specific learning where, yes, you're training a model, but there's actually training to be done just to figure out how to correct and kind of move these AI large language models in directions that help them develop.
That's pretty cool. And I guess a question that just came to my mind is that are there lines between where you guys stop from a product design and product development and where the AI labs picks up, or you work very close with those developers and AI labs? Where is Handshake AI starts and finishes, and where is the AI lab picks up from the output of you? Is that you guys are very integrated into their product development, or just there's a stop and handoff?
It's a great question. We work, basically, it's a large research effort. A lab has an inquiry into a specific experiment of how they could further part of their model. And what they're doing is working with Handshake AI to find those experts very quickly. Handshake AI trains them up. We teach them how to talk to a model. And then we are basically figuring it out with the labs themselves. So sometimes our research works great and we're able to further a model. And there are things that you've probably used out in the world that Handshake AI has had a part in developing. And there are lots of things that they're failed experiments. And that's a really unique place for us as a company to be in. It's incredibly different from where we were in the past, which is we don't exactly know where this thing is going. AI labs don't totally know where this thing is going, but we want to give it as much brain power as possible and give it the correct training at the right times. And that is what we are excited about, is that we are basically at the frontier as partners with those labs. So they will take the data that we give them, ingest it into their models, and then run evaluations to see if they have excelled in whatever advancements that they're looking for.
And it sounds like it's such from where I see it, it's just early on in this whole training with the data that you're generating, because I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, and please build on top of it, is that you're just starting with a few segments, scientific, part of your segment, part of your population, and then there's probably like expanding and expanding to all sort of sciences and all sort of spaces. Is that right?
Yes, it is basically an infinite amount of information that we could be feeding these models. It is really a balance of what are the labs interested in investing in? What are the biggest opportunities in terms of medicine and scientific research and other areas that are really excelling our understanding of, scientific specialties? And that's really exciting to see, is that it is not hitting a wall and all of a sudden we run out of knowledge. We keep excelling and exceeding our own information. And AI is helping us kind of further develop that.
That's pretty cool. So I do want to get into the design questions, but I have one more question, more from a product and pivot and transition point of view before we jump in deep into the product design processes that you went through. What was the hardest sort of part of this pivot and transition from what you guys were doing before to now building this fast growing AI based startup, basically building LLMs? It's a totally different mindset, I'm assuming, totally different motions, total ways of working, totally different ways of working. So what was the most difficult one? Because I want to ask, if you were going to do it again, now that you have the hindsight bias that you could look back at it, how would you change the process that the organization went through, and what would you do differently to make this transition?
Yeah. So to answer the first part of the question, I would break it down into two areas. One is like existing customers, and the other is our internal customers or teams. We have an amazing chief education officer that works directly with schools. And we were very surprised. It did not take much convincing for our universities to promote this program with their students. Getting students involved in the AI economy is a top priority for these schools. We had them promoting the opportunity without them asking. And I should say, these are very highly paid opportunities. We're talking $100 to $200 an hour. We've had many, many amazing stories of how much we've been able to pay out to fellows and help them through, whether it's a difficult time or getting them through school or helping supplement research funding, things like that. So schools want to prepare their students better for this future AI economy. And it's been really exciting and surprising to see how this effort has complemented it. For internal teams, it was much more of a different challenge. It is not usual that you hear a startup within a company, especially a 10-year-old company that is doing quite well for itself in its existing business line. And it required an entire shift in culture, product approach, decision-making, work expectations, our entire technology stack. We basically started from scratch, design system, design process, and we truly treated it like its own startup, but with the resources of an existing company that has gone through those motions and gone through those learnings over many years. So that was a really, really useful. I've been a part of a lot of startups. I have very few experiences where I've been able to do a startup within the support of a successful organization already. In terms of your second question, in terms of like the doing over again and the pivot, we spent a lot of time dancing around the brand. We went from Handshake One to calling ourselves Era, to calling ourselves Handshake Move, which is the model validation expert program, to finally landing on Handshake AI. There are many, many reasons ago. I mean, we're not even a 12-month-old startup, but we had no idea where this thing was going. And we were genuinely very concerned with the impact that this would have on the brand. if it didn't go the way we wanted, and many other reasons. But looking back, I would have preferred we spent way less resources going through those rebrands and way more just kind of coming forward and being this new product line with our existing ecosystem.
That's pretty cool. I thank you for sharing that background because you would, from outside, you think you chose the most obvious branding, like Handshake AI, right? You just added AI, but like it sounds like it was a significant amount of conversations and brainstorming and basically internal discussion around what would be the impact. And that's pretty cool to see that background. That's good. So I guess the pivot is obviously super fascinating. And it's one of the reasons when I heard about you guys and what you guys pulled off, it's just astonishing how you went through it in just such a short period of amount of time and the success you've had. So, but I think it's one thing that you decide, okay, yeah, we're going to do AI, and everybody wants to do AI these days. But there's another thing when you design the experience, the product around a product that people really use and trust. We all hear about trust, and I think you being the head of design, probably trust is one of those factors that you thought about quite significantly. So I want to dig deeper from that product design point of view and have a conversation with you when you're building for AI era, or when you're building AI enabled product, or when you're building actually an AI system. What are some of those design challenges that are not so much relevant to a traditional, let's say, software product, what you guys had before in your marketplace versus today? So that's sort of the theme of this second part of the conversation. What makes the AI product design very differently from traditional user experience? So that's the big, broad question. I guess let's start from there. How do you design user experience around AI when you have a totally different product from what you were doing before?
Yeah, it's all goes down, I think, to storytelling. The product that we built is, you conversing with AI and teaching it, and also at the same time having inputs of other AI telling you how to talk to the AI that you're shaping, and it's a lot of really new dynamics. And I think the larger platform of AI have really circled around this, which is accept what we don't know, anticipate a system and build around it, but also know that it is not going to go to plan. So I think being able to solicit feedback really early, allowing users to have an opinion about whether they like or don't like a response, and giving them some agency in actually tuning those models, whether it's a thumbs up, thumbs down, whether it's giving stars, I think is really, really important. I love just like designing with anticipation in mind, and how do you build towards that? And that's being okay not knowing every little nuance of how an interface is going to work, how a user is going to move through it, and being okay with that. I had something that comes to mind is a very funny story. When we were first developing the AI interviewer experience, we had a lot of hiccups. And one was that the AI actually kept breathing too hard, which was like such an odd little thing that you wouldn't think about with traditional software, which is just like you have an input, you have an output, it works perfectly, check, keep going. But all of a sudden we were talking about, interacting with voice and someone's personality and their experience, and we had no idea how to handle that. So we built around it. We couldn't always control the AI voice. So instead, let's see if you give it a rating afterwards out of 5 stars. Under 3, let's have you take the AI interviewer again. And like just giving people some control and giving people some agency around the software helps us improve it, and also makes people feel like, they actually have a say in what they're doing.
That's very cool. You would never, in a traditional product design, you would never think about breathing and the speed, and also to your point, in traditional product design, you have an input and you have 100% control on the output. But in the new era, you have no control, or maybe limited amount of control in the output. You mentioned a term that actually kind of piqued my interest, design with anticipation in mind. Can you unwrap that a little bit? What does that mean? Is that a framework specifically that you guys developed? Maybe just unpack that whole phrase and what does that mean?
Sure. Yeah, happy to. So This is from my art school days of actually less software development, but more visual identity or branding design. And that is, building in the context of, my early school days. How do you build a brand that lasts? And how do you build something that you don't exactly know how the visuals, let's say a logo, how is that going to fit in various contexts or ecosystems? What does it look like when someone's using your product in the middle of the night versus, bright and early during the day? I think we've dealt with our own users is that they have full-time jobs, they have full-time research, they're PhDs, they have a lot of work to do. And we've noticed that a lot of our fellows actually work on the weekends or at night or at off hours, and anticipating where they're at, their mood, their motivations, their incentives, and being able to kind of meet them where they are. That's how I've kind of translated that anticipation of something that's more visual to something that's more of an experience. And that's just really designing with an open mind and trying to think through all the corners, but also be okay that you're not going to hit every single instance and scenario every time. And instead, have your whole product culture and engineering culture okay with that.
That is very cool. It's almost like, but you have like unlimited number of situations to anticipate. So it really goes back to the amount of work I'm assuming you and your team are doing beforehand to kind of come up with all of these edge cases and all these anticipating all these different scenarios and trying to somehow put boundaries and guardrails around it to be able to enable the user. Mm,
Yeah, I
ve-
think I'll give engineers the credit there. Sometimes I joke that engineers are the best users and the best designers because they have to run through every single possible instance, and that's where I just tell my team, engineers are your best friends, and they will find every single possible scenario that you haven't thought through, and just be okay designing against that in the moment.
That's pretty cool. So let's talk about some of, so this was one framework, design with anticipation in mind. Are there other frameworks or mental models that you follow when it comes to designing for AI, basically, that is different from traditional design processes and frameworks?
Yeah, I think AI has changed a lot of the game. Even a few years ago, when you were going through a traditional product design process, you'd start with research. And a few years ago, a company came along called Mobbin that basically catalogs every single software you could think of, screenshot by screenshot, feature by feature. And that completely changed the game for us because we were spending hours and hours, days, just figuring out what competitors or tangential competitors or other industries were doing. Now, for me to understand what user settings looks like on mobile and web in 5 different industries, it takes 10 minutes. And what that did is that it actually unlocked us to think more critically about, all right, now that we're done with research, what are we actually solving for? And actually could focus on the meat of the problem. And AI has completely excelled that for us and accelerated our thinking. And I think what I push my designers to do is focus again on the narrative and the story. So instead of us figuring out what does user settings look like, how does search work, instead we can kind of go a little bit higher and think way more strategically as designers about how do all these screens and instances fit together. And that's a huge power for design. I always view designers as, being able to create a shared language because product managers, business, finance, engineering all have different ideas of what they should be building. And design has been the one to kind of provide that shared understanding. And now we have platforms like Lovable and other AI applications that can really generate very quickly. But what it can't do still is connect all of those dots together. And that's where designers are finally able to kind of like get to that point of thinking through a large architectural system and thinking through some of the most interesting parts, which isn't necessarily the UI, but how this product strategically impacts the business. And that has been usually restricted to very senior designers and very senior and mature companies that are able to think less about how do we build this MVP and more about where do we go next. And now we all get to think about where does this thing go next and actually build towards that earlier and earlier.
Hmm. That's very interesting. So the design, the research process is just shrunk down. to 10
Yes.
minutes, as you mentioned.
Yes.
And then you have prototyping tools that could enable you to get whatever you want out as soon as, as soon as you're having a coffee, basically. I'm just assuming in a very short period of time. And then it's all what's left is those architecture and all the bigger decisions around how you design for the outcome that you're trying to do. It actually kind of, as you were talking about it, you mentioned engineers are your best friends, and then you really give them a lot of credit. And then you mentioned product managers have their own thinking, and then designers. Can we go on this tangent of where now in this AI era does product design stop and starts and it stops? Where does product management stop and starts, and where does engineering stop and starts? Because everybody is now worried about or just curious about the blaring line between all sort of disciplines: product design, product marketing, product engineer. Everybody's sort of like stepping into the other side, or the adjacent sides of their roles. How does that work? And you guys ship products that now make hundreds of millions of dollars. So you must have found the solution of how to work as a team in this blurry lines of different roles. Can you walk us through how does that work at Handshake AI?
Sure. Yeah, I don't know if we found the solution, but we found some things that do work. I think the blurring of the lines is amazing for the industry. Um, I do not miss the days where an engineer just did one thing and a product manager just made the product requirements and the designer was kind of in the corner making it all look good. I think the ability to bring everyone together and think about something immediately, that you don't need just a whiteboard or hours on Sketch or Figma, but you have something and a prototype immediately to talk through. I think it just accelerates the entire thinking. If I could have an engineer that gives me a prototype or works in Figma and I have a product manager that has coded something, like, we have been effective as a team and as a leadership organization to empower people to think critically about their other functions, because a user doesn't think, oh, that engineer did that, and oh, I like what that product designer did, and oh, that PM, really nice, requirements thinking. They just experience the thing. And I think the blurring of the lines might actually bring us a little bit closer to the reality of how users are interacting with our products. And the more we can do that and empower teams, the less you need people getting in the way of people building stuff. And it becomes less about how do we do the thing, and it becomes more about how do we lead our teams towards a larger objective. And that's really where I have played, I think, a bigger part, especially rolling off being the only designer, building a design team out and empowering them to feel the ownership over these specific areas. It's kind of like setting a little bit of a vision and helping people walk towards that together. And AI has just allowed us to do that much faster, but you still need the same thinking and the same technical skills and the same strategic sequencing to get there.
You're the first product leader, product design leader that actually is positive about this blurring lines, because everybody is scared, at least in the recent conversation I've had. Most of people are worried about, am I a product manager? Is my team a product manager or engineer? Are they wasting their time when they're prototyping, or is it actually helping us? Everybody is worried about people are doing some other person's job because now AI makes it so much more easier, and therefore not being focused on the things they need to focus. You're almost the first one, I'm 100% sure you're the first one who are actually positive about this blurring the lines. So I really like your way of your thinking. But then it goes back to, how would you hire people for this new mindset? It's almost a new mindset. But at a company like Handshake AI, you guys are probably, you don't, I mean, I'm sure you're not operating like a big enterprise, so there's not a lot of politics happening, or there's no those like clear lines, don't step over line, which we all know in big enterprises exist. So you guys don't have that. But at the same time, I'm thinking you have some way of hiring and onboarding people specifically for that mindset. Or, am I right? Or is there a specific way you go about creating culture and create ways of working within your team that enables those adoption of blurring line in a positive line, and not being worried about, oh, I'm losing my job to like the engineer or product manager or product designer who's just using AI to do my job?
It's a good question. The hiring that we do, I always hire for people that love to collaborate. We always look for people with low egos and high interests in learning and excelling and knowing where they're at in their career and their skill set, and being interested in pushing themselves to the next level. Handshake AI has very uniquely positioned itself from a practice perspective as having many designers actually work in the same area. So you could imagine just like in one screen, there could be 2 or 3 product designers that own bits and pieces of it. And it's not that the product is not, larger than one screen, but it's complex and it needs a lot of people thinking and pushing things. And my team is fantastic at being open to everyone kind of blurring those lines on who owns what. And as a design leader, it reduces the pressure entirely. It doesn't mean that, one area, because that designer is good at that one thing, that's going to be good, but over there, that thing they aren't as skilled at, so it'll have a poor success. It's that everyone is working together and everyone learns from each other, and it's a push and pull. So I mean, maybe it's because I was in school as a painter. I learned to program, got into software design, and I've always kind of worn different hats, and that's been useful for me. And I think, we have UX researchers on the team and content designers on the team, and our UX researchers are designing, and our content designers are in Figma, and our product designers are writing. And that's because, everyone isn't in one little box. Everyone has lots of different dimensions to themselves. And we absolutely look for not only designers, but product managers and engineers and data scientists that are interested in designing for a cohesive experience. And I hope that becomes more of a trend in the industry.
Yeah. That's a really good point. I mean, hiring for the mindset of collaboration, that's actually a really good one. In a way, in the AI era, you have to be able to collaborate differently and be less protective and more open-minded. So I like that framework. Um, I ask one more question about this ways of working, and then I do want to get to the designing in a hyper-growth environment like you guys have been. But the last question, maybe in terms of ways of working, is about the KPI of success, because traditionally, it's really built on top of what we just talked about. The blurring line also blurs the line of accountability, right? So if something goes wrong, or if actually something goes well, and then you have to reward someone for their performance, or something goes wrong, so you want to go and learn from that failure and that mistake and then rebuild. How would you figure out who was responsible for it, and what are the ways you define accountability in a very collaborative and cooperative and blaring line ways of working? Have you guys found better ways of holding people accountable?
We have, and I think this relates probably to what you're alluding to on hypergrowth. We have a limited amount of designers, but we obviously have many more software engineers. And what we found from an accountability perspective is that everyone should own something. Doesn't matter how big or how small, that accountability not only, it's less about who to blame or who to promote, but it's more so to give people agency over their work. And we have found that to be unbelievably successful. And it doesn't matter if you own the tiniest part of one screen or you own an end-to-end flow or a large infrastructure project. It's that someone's name is on that, not to blame, but to give them the ability to help make decisions, to build consensus, to organize people around. And we actually have a big spreadsheet of every single engineer and every single feature, and it's broken down very, very succinctly. And it has been really helpful because people want to own stuff. They want to see things through to the end and see that they have been able to see something to be successful, or building a culture of experimentation and some things fail. And that's okay as long as you kind of set up the environment that not everything is going to be 100% all the time. If we release software and it had no bugs, I don't think it's really software. Like, I think that it's kind of the reality of building, and it's less about, are we going to hit everything every time? And it's more so, how do we build a culture of caring and compassion and making mistakes and knowing that collectively we're working towards something, and at the same time giving people their due success and honor when they do excel at something. So I think it's a really unique balance for us, especially as we grow so fast.
So everybody owns something, but also they're collaborating and partnering in multiple areas which other people are owning. So it's a mix of ownership, but also extreme collaboration. and sort of figuring out the balance between that. I own this piece, but I'm also relying on so many people to help me collaborate and get that out. But also I'm collaborating with so many others so other people can get what they own out. That's the framework. All right, that's
Yes,
pretty cool.
exactly. Yes, and it's been effective so far. We'll see as we continue to scale and get even larger. But I really believe that people owning things themselves is the best way to keep people happy and excited and motivated.
That's a good one to actually remember as you hire and grow the team. I love that. All right, so now let's get and sort of like we're in the last part of our conversation, the hyper growth that you've been through with, I'm sure not only Handshake AI, but also with Oscar Health and other companies and products that you've been involved. So I want to just talk about that operating at maximum speed. When you're growing the way Handshake AI is growing, you're probably forced to make some design decisions, some product decisions, some engineering decisions that if you were not growing at that speed, you would have not made those decisions. So I'd love to switch gear here and kind of like talk about what happens when you have a product that suddenly takes off at a rapid scale and everybody wants to use it and everybody wants to pay for it. What does that mean when it comes to with working and making decisions and all that, sort of the downstream of that hyper scale and hyper fast hyper growth basically? So maybe walk us through how to, as you guys realize the revenue is just taking off, the demand is taking off, everybody wants to work with you. What were some of those product design priorities and decisions that shift in your mind in order to be able to keep up with growth?
Yeah, it sounds counterintuitive, but just because the revenue is there doesn't mean we should sign every deal. And for human data, and this is really critical to the business, quality is everything. So the second that we're delivering data that isn't of the utmost quality, we lose trust in the industry, and we're not delivering, from the expectations that our partner labs are looking for. So quality has to stay high. And to do that, it means that we need our ways of working and our processes in place before things start taking off. And that's where having structures in place of accountability and ownership, knowing whether it's an on-call rotation or whatever engineers own something, also knowing how to make decisions. So we very early on, before we ever got to the numbers that you're describing, we had escalation paths in place. Who makes a decision? What if it ever reaches this point? Who's making the next decision? I'm very grateful that we've never had to reach those types of escalation paths, but having those in place really helps people make decisions and unlock. And I think something else that really comes to mind is we didn't overinvest in everything. I think to start, it's really easy to, let's say, build a design system from scratch and think about every single possible scenario and build it before we even have a first customer or product. We didn't do any of that. We built the tracks as the train started moving. And is it a little chaotic? And is that kind of a very delicate balance? Yes. But we're not over investing in componentry or products or thinking that we might never use. And even if we do need to build them, so it's an incredibly heavy operations business, as an example, we have a whole internal tool that our operations runs off of. It's a hacked together project until we decide, all right, this is ready to be productized. And we do that still today. There's so many parts of our experience that we're still figuring out how much should we invest in. And it's not because we don't think those things should be productized, but it's because it's constantly an evaluation of what is the investment worth and what do we get out of it, and how does this lead towards the larger objective that we have in mind.
So there is maybe one or two things that you're not willing to sacrifice at all, which is the quality of the human data. But there's so many other things that you're willing to sacrifice, even though in a perfect environment, you would have just done a lot more. But in the hyper growth environment, you just let them go. And then as long as it's actually working, you're happy with it. It's a dual decision making of don't sacrifice this, but everything else is a game as long as we're getting what I love it. So what is there any specific example, like a design decisions you guys made that actually fueled that, it helped that hyper growth? Like there's some of these things that you said, okay, let's just do this, and then suddenly like all the AI labs were really into it. I'm just assuming there are examples like that, but is there anything like that specifically that you guys have made design decisions specifically that suddenly unlocked a massive opportunity in the product?
Yeah, it's funny because my response before was that we didn't overinvest in our operations, but at the same time, we did build our operations out, and that was one of the first areas of investment to start. Handshake AI's enormous benefit is that we have millions of people in our network, and the ability to find those candidates and match them with labs and those opportunities quickly is our bread and butter. And the ability for us, I think it's the numbers over 85 or 90% are all found within Handshake's network. And that is something that our competitors can't do because they don't have 10 years of that type of population and user trust and everything. And so what we've been able to do is really early on invest in a lot of the operations. I'll give a very specific example. When you are, let's say, tasking and you're trying to stump an LLM to understand physics better, we have to, on the operations side, build that task out. And it's a block of flows that connect together. Here's a question, here's a response. How would you change it? Give us what you would do differently. And that string together creates a task that a fellow will then interact with. And a lot of competitors don't have basically a drag and drop experience where you can connect the dots. And that's something that we invested in incredibly early because we knew that there would be flexibility in task design and the structures and the needs of the labs. And that is something that we have still held true in terms of our priorities because we're able to pivot quickly. We're able to ramp people up quickly because we have the network. They're in our internal tools. We know exactly what people care about, what they're interested in, what they're good at. And then we can very, very quickly build out tasks that match our lab's requirements. So definitely the operations. And it's still a big push and pull, but it's definitely something that we have decided to invest in. And has been really, really helpful on the returns.
I wasn't expecting you having that answer. I was thinking some like it's great, meaning that you actually made design decisions and product decisions and system decisions that enable that fast and hyper growth. This is an excellent answer. It wasn't coming to my mind, so I'm glad that we had this conversation. So let's have one more question around sort of in a rapid environment, and what does that mean when it comes to building product? And then I want to wrap up because we only have you for a couple more minutes. And my question is not just your hyper growth and your specific product is highly in demand, but the space itself is just rapidly evolving. I tell you, like the videos and the use cases and the content that we've created 6 months ago with our guests like you, they may not be even relevant when we go back to 6 months past content about they're not anymore relevant because some tools came up, some thinking changed, another AI LLM model was launched. So the space itself evolving so fast that even content cannot keep up, and case studies changes and use cases changes. But then how would you guys keep up with new models and new labs, and the labs are always constantly evolving? And how does that impact your internal systems, hiring, ways of working, everything we've been talking about?
Yeah, I have never worked in such a fast moving space. The majority of my experience, where I really, got my teeth into the space is in healthcare, which could not move any slower. So it's been a really fun learning for me. In terms of from a design perspective, the mechanics and the fundamentals don't change. At the end of the day, you're building systems that need to scale, that need to make sense to humans, that people need to interact with. But we have been incredibly fortunate to be working as partners with these labs. And what that means is that we understand and we kind of see a little bit beyond the horizon of what is on the frontier of the AI world. And we make bets. We have an internal research team. They are always thinking about where is the space going, what is the appetite, what are the competitive edges, and where should we as a company invest in? And where is our bread and butter? Should it be this new data type or should it be that one? And it's a lot of math involved in us figuring out where we should go. but it's also being able to allocate part of our team to actually figuring out that innovation. And I think that is one of the best things that we've been able to do, is that we are not 100% all focused on the thing that the customer needs. We have a percentage of our people focused on the new stuff and focused on making bets and investigating and doing experiments. And that has really helped us inform not only maybe being a few steps ahead, but also informs how we think about building products, because we know it keeps changing. So it means that our technology has to be receptive and open to change. It means that our operations have to anticipate that change and know that maybe a data tape is important today, but is old news tomorrow. And I think it's definitely that combination, but the design principles at the end of the day, the product building holds true. And as long as we stick to, the idea that at the end of the day, this is building products for humans, it has been effective so far.
I think there's this common theme underlying everything you've been talking about, is just that mindset. I feel like you have to have embrace a specific mindset to be able to be successful in AI space, which is rapidly evolving in a hyper growth environment. And that feels like, it comes through your hiring decisions, it comes through your onboarding, it comes through some of your product design decisions. Look, a little bit of a different mindset. And we talked about collaboration mindset and being able to open to that. So maybe it's really just embracing and having the mindset of operating in this different, rapidly growing environment. So Gabe, you've had fantastic experiences, fantastic success in your career, part of sort of rockets that are going to the moon, as they say out there. So first of all, congratulations and thank you for sharing that. But let's wrap up with an advice. What advice would you give to product managers, product designers who are entering into this space? Maybe they want to work for someone like Handshake AI. What skills, mindset, or anything else that they need to gain and be ready for, as if they want to be like you?
Oh boy. I think it's something that I tell my design team, and I think will always hold true. And I've probably already said it during our time. It's all about the story. It's not about the pixels. The UI is going to change. Liquid glass all of a sudden is the new hot thing. That'll shift in a year. It's not about the trends. It's about the why. And it's about building an architecture around why people are using something, who you're building for, and what their motivations and incentives are. And I think that is more important now than it ever has been, because we now don't have to worry about how to build a settings page or a search page or a profile. But what we do need to worry about is how all these things connect. And the more you can focus on the narrative and the storytelling of your piece of software or design, I think the better you're set up to design for people and not just design for the vacuum of whatever design trend is. And that has really held true for us. And I hope it continues to be true.
Wow, very well said. Design for people. It's all about this story. Gabe, it's been great to have you on this show. Thank you for sharing your success story and your experience with Products That Can community, and hope we can have you back on the show very soon.
Thank you so much, Hoda. It's been a pleasure.